The day had begun like any other, quiet, ordinary, with people bustling about their routines. Across cities and countries, life moved forward as it always had, until at once the skies above dimmed to twilight. People looked up, shading their eyes against an alien silhouette, massive and foreboding, that had appeared above Earth. It was no typical invasion. This ship, gleaming with a strange aura, was enormous yet strangely elegant, seeming to glide through space rather than cut through it. Its surface shimmered with a mesmerizing pattern of colors, emerald greens and opalescent blues that shifted like the scales of a colossal beast. But it was more than just its size that captivated. It radiated a presence, a hum of power that felt as ancient as it was advanced. The stillness was shattered as a voice reverberated through every device worldwide. The message broadcasted in every language humanity knew, translating itself into every dialect and form. "Send forth your greatest warrior," it declared. "I shall send mine. The winner shall determine your planet's fate." The words left a stunned silence in their wake, the world held captive by the heavy finality of what it had just heard. People gathered around televisions, phones, and radios. Leaders met in emergency sessions, and for once, politics and differences seemed to melt away as a singular thought consumed everyone. Who would stand for Earth? An initial shock gave way to feverish discussion as debates over who would face this alien challenger echoed worldwide. Names of soldiers, martial artists, and even tech-augmented fighters circulated through the global conversation. But as the days passed, one name rose to the forefront, a name spoken with both reverence and fear: Commander Cale Draven. To his allies, Cale was a leader, a warrior without peer. To his enemies, he was a ghost who'd haunted countless battlefields. Years ago, Cale had led forces through some of humanity's darkest days. He fought battles that seemed hopeless, facing enemies both human and machine. Each time he returned, scarred and wounded but victorious, he became more than a man. He became a legend. The stories told about Cale were known by soldiers across the world. Stories of him dragging fallen comrades to safety through firestorms, of holding his ground against entire armies alone, and even of outsmarting artificial intelligences designed to predict his every move. For Cale, every battle was more than just survival. It was a test of his will and a testament to the resilience of those he fought for. When the global leaders finally asked him to face the alien challenge, Cale hesitated. He knew the weight of this decision, the lives depending on him, the legacy he'd be leaving. But as he looked into the faces of the people around him, saw the trust in their eyes, he made his choice. Accepting the challenge with a quiet nod, he didn't offer a grand speech. His silence was enough. They had all seen what he could do, and Cale had never been one for words. As he prepared, he reviewed every skill, every strategy, knowing this would be unlike any battle he'd ever fought. The appointed site for the duel was a remote Pacific island, chosen for its isolation, where the fight could be witnessed by the world but not endanger it. The island was mostly untouched by human hands. Rocky shores, sharp cliffs, and dense jungles framed the setting, a fitting battleground for what was to come. Hours before the duel, the alien vessel hovered above the shoreline, casting a shadow over the quiet beach. The vessel descended gently, its weight barely disturbing the sand as it touched down. On the other side of the island, Cale's own transport arrived, but he was alone. Every other pair of eyes watched through distant screens, capturing his every move. Cale stepped onto the beach, feeling the sand shift beneath his boots, his gaze locked on the vessel in front of him. A ramp lowered slowly, hissing with pressurized steam, and the entire world seemed to hold its breath. Out of the vessel emerged a figure that defied anything Cale had ever seen. The alien warrior was tall, towering over Cale by at least a head. Its armor gleamed, intricate patterns etched into its surface, glowing faintly with a subdued but lethal energy. Despite the armor's weight, the alien moved with fluidity, grace even, as it approached Cale. The alien's helmet covered its face, but its eyes were visible through narrow slits. They were bright, intelligent, and observant, assessing Cale with a gaze that spoke of a soldier's respect and an elite warrior's instinct. He was Ryu Khan, the champion of a race that spanned galaxies, a warrior caste trained in combat for lifetimes. Ryu Khan paused a few paces from Cale, and slowly he bowed. The gesture was one of respect, yet heavy with the promise of what was to come. Kale, understanding the universal language of honor among warriors, gave a slight nod, his gaze unwavering. Without another word, they began. The duel erupted in a flurry of sparks and sand as Kale launched the first strike, his eyes calculating every possible counter the alien might throw at him. Ryukan's response was swift and decisive. With a fluid, almost supernatural grace, his blade arced through the air to meet Kale's, deflecting it effortlessly. The clash rang out across the beach, a metallic roar that sent shivers through the watching world. Kale withdrew, then advanced again, his movements sharp and purposeful, the controlled aggression of a warrior who'd learned to pace himself in battles that could drag on for hours. But Ryukan met each of his strikes with the ease of a master. He was both quick and deliberate, every motion rooted in ancient precision. His swordsmanship had an elegance Kale had never encountered in any human style. It was a language all its own, blending lethal accuracy with ritualistic movements. Kale adjusted his stance, launching into a rapid combination of punches, kicks, and feints, trying to throw off Ryukan's rhythm. Yet, Ryukan anticipated each strike, his movements eerily synchronized as if he could sense Kale's attacks a moment before they came. Each counter was exact, precise, a paragon of control. Ryukan spun his blade in a sequence of arcs and sweeps that Kale soon realized was more than a defense. It was a battle dance, a series of moves refined over centuries, perhaps millennia. For every furious offensive Kale launched, there was a calm, calculated response. Ryukan's body flowed like water around him, adapting, moving, calculating. As they fought, Kale became aware of the nature of Ryukan's style. It wasn't just a display of strength, but a philosophy, a statement of unity between mind, body, and weapon. Ryukan wielded his sword as though it was an extension of his spirit, a symbol of an honor Kale recognized from his own experiences on the battlefield. Minutes turned to hours. The sun began to dip towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the sand. Both fighters' breaths came faster, their movements ever so slightly slowing, but neither showed any sign of backing down. Kale knew that if he was to win, he'd have to find a chink in Ryukan's seemingly flawless technique. He needed to understand the rhythm, to anticipate it. He watched, observing the slight shifts in Ryukan's movements, catching faint patterns that emerged only through intense focus. And slowly, Kale began to adapt. With each clash, each narrowly avoided blow, Kale felt himself getting closer to understanding the dance of Ryukan's blade. The hours they had spent together in this deadly struggle had given them a bond forged in combat. There was an unspoken respect between them now, a mutual recognition of each other's dedication to their crafts. Kale could feel it, a powerful, unbreakable connection between two warriors who had committed their lives to a code few could understand. With the day turning into twilight, Kale's body began to falter. The hours of relentless movement and the weight of his armor wore on him, fatigue seeping into his muscles. He knew he was reaching the limits of his endurance. He fought on, fueled by determination and the responsibility of defending humanity itself, but his mind acknowledged the odds. Ryukan's strength, alien and otherworldly, seemed inexhaustible. But as the minutes stretched on, Kale noticed something. Ryukan's armor began to dim, its energy pulses weakening as the lights around his chest plate flickered. Earth's gravity, atmosphere, and elements were taking their toll on the alien tech. Kale's battle-hardened instincts flared. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. With a final reserve of strength, Kale threw himself into the offensive, pushing his body beyond its limits. He adapted his style, infusing each attack with feints and unpredictable movements designed to disrupt the rhythmic, ritualistic defense of Ryukan's technique. Each strike was faster, harder, more unorthodox. He launched a flurry of quick jabs, low sweeps, and feigned attacks that threw off Ryukan's sense of timing. For the first time, Kale saw a fraction of hesitation in his opponent's eyes. Ryukan stepped back, recalibrating, and that's when Kale struck. With a powerful downward strike, Kale aimed for Ryukan's blade, and this time his tactic worked. The impact sent Ryukan's weapon flying from his hand, embedding itself in the sand some feet away. The alien warrior staggered, momentarily unarmed, and Kale saw his chance. He roared, a primal cry echoing across the beach, his voice carrying the weight of all he fought for. This was humanity's indomitable will made manifest, a sound that pulsed through the watching millions, igniting hope and pride. He advanced, his weapon raised, prepared to deliver the final blow. Kale was mere steps away from Ryukan when he stopped, catching sight of something that stayed his hand. Ryukan was kneeling, bowing his head, his arms resting by his sides. He made no move to retrieve his weapon. This wasn't surrender, nor was it defeat. It was something more profound. The stillness between them was heavy with unspoken words. Kale looked into Ryukan's eyes, expecting to see anger or shame. Instead, he saw a calm acceptance, a dignity that resonated with him on a level beyond words. This was a warrior's submission, not out of fear but respect. Ryukan's gaze held no resentment. Instead, it conveyed a sense of pride, of having met a worthy opponent. Kale's instincts as a soldier, tempered by his years of battle and experience, told him that to end Ryukan here would be a betrayal of something greater. The purpose of this duel was not to dominate but to prove worth, to meet in a moment of unbreakable resolve. This alien samurai, bound by a code of honor as ancient as his own, had shown Kale that sometimes true victory lay in respect, not in conquest. Lowering his weapon, Kale extended his hand. The gesture was universal, an offering of peace, an acknowledgement of the shared strength between them. He hoped Ryukan would understand, that the unspoken language between them would be clear. For a moment, Ryukan simply stared at Kale's outstretched hand. Then, with a small nod, he accepted. His grip was firm, and as they clasped hands, Kale could feel the power, respect, and gratitude in the alien's touch. It was a truce, a moment that transcended the boundaries of language, culture, and even species. As the alien ship lifted off, its engines humming softly, Kale watched Ryukan disappear into the vessel. In the silent aftermath, Kale remained standing on the beach, his gaze fixed on the sky. The weight of what he'd just experienced settled over him. This wasn't just a victory for Earth. It was a statement, a declaration that humanity's strength wasn't merely in their capacity to fight, but in their ability to respect, to understand, and to reach beyond violence. All around the world, people watched the live broadcasts, their initial fear and anticipation transforming into pride. Kale's choice to spare Ryukan, to honor him as a warrior, sent a ripple of unity across nations. People who had only moments before been gripped by the dread of invasion felt a collective surge of hope and pride. Kale was hailed as a hero, but in his heart, he knew that this was a victory for humanity as a whole, a testament to the shared values and strengths they'd all worked for. He returned to his people not as a conqueror, but as a bridge to something greater, a messenger of peace born through challenge. The following morning, the skies above Earth shimmered with a familiar light as a new transmission was received. It was broadcasted on every frequency, every screen, the alien voice now holding a solemn grace. The Galactic Council spoke, its voice reverberating through the world, echoing in the ears of every human. Humanity, we have witnessed your courage, your resilience, and your honor. You have proven yourselves worthy. We extend to you an invitation to join us in the alliance of civilizations among the stars. The announcement sent waves of excitement, wonder, and pride across the globe. Kale was summoned once more, this time not as a warrior, but as an ambassador. The choice he had made in the heat of battle had opened doors humanity had never dreamed of, a chance to connect with civilizations far beyond Earth. In the days that followed, Earth prepared to take its first steps into the larger galaxy. Kale stood ready, not only as a warrior, but as a symbol of humanity's values: honor, respect, and a resilience that no force in the universe could break. As he looked up at the stars, Kale knew that this was only the beginning. Humanity had passed the test, but their journey was far from over. Together, they would forge a new path, one that would take them to the stars, not